Welcome to Sound Bites, hosted by registered dietitian nutritionist Melissa Joy Dobbins. Let's delve into the science, the psychology, and the strategies behind good food and nutrition.
Hello and welcome back to the Sound Bites podcast. Today's episode is all about food, nutrition, dieting, or not dieting. It should be a very interesting conversation. My guest today is Abby Langer. She is the owner of Abby Langer Nutrition, based in Toronto. She's been a dietitian for about 20 years. Welcome to the show, Abby.
Thank you for having me.
I've been waiting to have you on for quite some time. I don't remember the first time we met in person, but I do know that we were on a Canadian lentils tour in Saskatoon a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Yeah, it was so wonderful.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, I definitely remember talking with you then. I'm sure I'd probably met you in person before.
Yeah.
It was just more recently that I've started following your blog. And I mean, I know we've been following each other on social media for a while, but I'm really you've been more on my radar lately. And, when I was looking more into your background, I was surprised we have kind of a similar path from clinical ICU all the way to entrepreneurship. And I started my own nutrition business in 2011, and you started yours in 2012.
That's right. Yeah, very similar.
Yeah. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about your background and your business. And we're going to dive into some topics that, I really love how credible and outspoken you are. And I'll just leave it at that. And we're going to talk more about that.
So I became a dietitian in the 90s, and I was an inpatient dietitian for a really long time, an ICU dietitian, as you said. But you can only do that for so long. It really gets to your heart and to your strength. I mean, to watch people in such critical condition. And then I moved into different areas of the hospital aside from ICU. And, eventually I moved to outpatient, even though I thought I would never go to outpatient.
Really?
I always thought it was boring.
Oh, that's so funny.
Me, I wanted the ICU. I wanted the sicker, the better. They would come in on the helicopter and I would get them, and it would be like TPN and all of that. And it would be amazing. But once I had kids, the calm of outpatient was so much better for me. And then eventually, I was tired of not being home with my kids. I knew that I had to make a break for it because I was getting bored. I was in my outpatient job for 10 years.
Wow.
Which is crazy. It just was so long. And I know some people, they stay in the same job for a really long time. I can't do that. I really wanted to get out from under somebody else's oversight, if you will. And so I started to write because I knew I had a lot to say. And I knew that I was the only person who could say it like that. And I started to develop recipes, do food photography. I'm self-taught with basically everything. Although writing, I do have an English degree, which I did do a 4-year English degree before I did my nutrition degree.
Oh.
And it just snowballed from there. I found that I really enjoyed working for myself. I'm very self-motivated, so I don't have a problem like getting down to work. And it was so rewarding to be with my kids because my kids are 10 and 12, but they were raised by nannies for the first however many years of their lives because I had to work and my husband works. And so it was really nice to be able to take my kids. Honestly, when I first took my kids to school, like when I became full-time in my own business in 2017, I brought my kids to school and I had to ask my daughter where to drop her off.
Yeah.
Because I had never done it.
You were probably so excited to do it too.
I was so happy. And I'm that kind of mom who go to the schoolyard and like hand out popsicles.
Yes.
I was just so happy. It's just so much better for our family. It works for us. And thankfully, my business took off so I can afford to do it because I know a lot of people cannot, and I couldn't for a really long time.
It's so interesting you say that because when I started my own business in 2011, it was also to spend more time with family. My son is 12 and my daughter's 20. And at the time, my daughter was 11 and my son was 2.5. And I've said this on the show before, but there was a lot of things going on in my personal life and at work. And I really felt that was the thing that I needed to do. However, I did it part-time. So I had a part-time diabetes education job, and then I had my business on the side part-time.
Yeah.
So when I got rid of that part-time diabetes education job and went full force into my own business and had that opportunity to, take my kids to school, pick them up, be there when they got home from school. Although admittedly, a lot of times I would give them the stink eye, like, I'm on a conference call, don't interrupt me or whatever. But when my son was in daycare, if he got sick, there was nobody to cover him and there was nobody to cover me to cover him. And it's so stressful.
It's very stressful.
I could totally relate to a lot of what you're saying, and just to be able to be with your family and also do what you love with regard to nutrition. Before you go on and tell me more about your business, you were based in Chicago at one point.
I actually went to Loyola University in Chicago. That's the extent of my involvement with Chicago, but I did a post-baccalaureate there for nutrition. And then I moved to California to do my internship and to practice. And then I moved home.
Okay. So Toronto's home.
Yeah. Born and bred in Toronto. I love it here. It's amazing.
That's wonderful. My only trip to Toronto was in January of last year.
Yeah.
And it was colder
I know.
there than it was in Chicago. It was brutal.
It was freezing. Yes, I was invited to that event and I didn't end up going, but I remember how cold it was.
Yeah.
It was freezing.
It was too cold to even just be outside.
Well, right now it's incredibly warm. Like it's boiling hot.
Okay, so tell me more about your business. You have a lot to say and you do it in a lot of different ways. So tell me about that.
Primarily, I'm a nutrition writer. I do write for my own blog and I do write for certain publications. I've written for major publications, most often Self Magazine and Men's Health Magazine. I've done Women's Health Magazine, but I haven't been doing a lot of pitching magazines because I'm coming out with a book in January 2021 called Good Food, Bad Diet, The Habits You Need to Lose Weight, Ditch Diet Culture, and Heal Your Relationship with Food Forever. And that's being released by Simon & Schuster.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so I'm busy with that, but I'm sort of a jack of all trades because I do recipe development, do food photography, I write, I do media. So it's a lot of work. And especially I'm so type A. So I do have an assistant. I actually just got an assistant, but I do all my social media, which is crazy. It's just so much to keep on top of, but it's a labor of love. I love working for myself. I love what I do. I stand firm in my opinions and I know what I stand for. And I know that my message needs to be out there in the world, especially with all the craziness around diet and diet culture and all of that. And I want to make sure that the information that I disseminate into the world is accurate and credible. And I take a lot of pains actually to ensure that that is the case in everything that I write.
Yes. And we are going to focus most of our conversation on that because I'm just so impressed with the critical thinking that you do, the science that you share, and how outspoken you are. I admire you. It's hard for me to speak up and speak out, and it's hard to put yourself out there. So I want to hear more about what that's like for you. But first, let me ask, you wear a lot of different hats. You do a lot of different things. And clearly with your writing expertise, that comes through, I'm sure, in everything you do, but especially the blog and the book. But you have to be a good writer to come up with organizing your content for media and so on. But with all of these things, the recipe development, all of that, you clearly must enjoy it all. But was there one thing that really sort of drew you?
I really do love to write. Like I mentioned before, I have an English degree, but I never really used it. I never used it for 20 years because I was writing in charts and that doesn't take any talent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I never really knew what kind of a writer I was. But I do also, it's funny, I love the photography part and the recipe creation. I grew up in a house where my mom could go into the kitchen and just put together a meal from whatever was in the cabinets. We never really used a lot of recipes or anything. And so I have those genetics and I do love that. And I always would say before I started developing recipes and taking photos that I used to be creative, but I had lost it. I thought I had lost those skills in adulthood, but actually they're still there. And I'm so blessed to be able to put those to use now. I enjoy everything, but writing's my thing. Like a lot of dietitians want to be in TV and whatever. I couldn't care less about TV. Like, I don't love it. It's so much preparation for like the shortest 5 minutes of your life.
Or 3.
That's accurate, right? I mean,
oh yeah, I don't do as much live TV anymore, and I don't miss it.
No.
No.
And you get up so early a lot of the time, forget it. Ew.
Oh my gosh. And then when I used to do a lot of live TV, I would stay up till 3 a.m. and then get up at 5 a.m. And
you don't really sleep either, because what if you sleep through your call time?
Yeah. And you can't sleep on your stomach because then your eyes are all puffy. It's just stuff that I really don't care to worry about right now.
But you get your makeup done. And one of the best things is when they put false eyelashes on me, because I can't do it for myself.
I've never had that.
I mean, it's not worth it to me.
Nah. Yeah, it's interesting. Like for me, podcasting is more the vehicle that is in my comfort zone, and clearly writing for you. And that helps provide a voice for you as well. So I mentioned that I really admire your ability to speak up and speak out. And I think sometimes on what some people would consider touchy subjects, whether it's a blog post that you're doing or just on social media, you really get into the science and you call out like those celebrities and those quacks and those Instagram wellness influencers, and even some credentialed health professionals who cross the line. You don't shy away from getting into the nitty gritty with the scientific stuff and the specific diets, specific products like collagen, alkaline water, is sugar addictive, things like that. And even on your site, you have don't mess with science.
Right.
But there's one recent post in particular that really caught my attention. To me, it was sort of like this drink of water after being in the desert for a really long time. You put words to a lot of my thoughts and feelings that were just kind of swirling around in my brain. And the post was learning curve. Do 95% of people who lose weight really gain it back? So I'd really like to dive into that post.
Sure.
Because you shared so much insight and science that to help clear up not just what is, these statements and myths that are thrown about frequently. Let's peel this back and get to what's really going on here. What are the facts really? And what are maybe some of the politics and stuff going on with it?
Right.
So what prompted you to write this post to begin with?
It came from the fact that I've been hearing this 95% of people gain the weight back sort of statistic for so long, like years. And in fact, it is years old. It's from 1959. But a lot of people who don't believe in diets, be they dietitians or anyone else, like to toss this statistic around to try to prove that trying to lose weight is futile. And while I don't like diets and I don't put people on diets, I firmly believe that you can lose weight and keep it off. And that telling people that they might as well not even try to lose weight is irresponsible. Mm-hmm. It's irresponsible. And using this statistic, which, as I mentioned, is decades old, to back your claims up or back your stance up on that is even worse, because the person who came up with the statistic, even he now says you shouldn't be using it. So why are we still using it? So I decided to go there and dig up the study that they did that came out with this 95% number and write a post about it, because I was so tired and fired up about having that tossed around as though it's gospel when really it's bullshit.
Yeah. And you'd said in the article, there's so many good points, but you said that there are some who believe that intentional weight loss is not only more dangerous than being overweight, it's also unsustainable and pointless and shouldn't even be attempted.
Right.
And worse yet, some of these people are saying that it creates an eating disorder or disordered eating. So it's not even just that it's not going to work and that it's going to lead to more weight gain, but it can cause eating disorders and disordered eating.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, not only that, but there are people who say that any intentional weight loss is a sign of an eating disorder.
Yeah, I mean, that just blows my mind.
It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. And for credentialed healthcare professionals to be taking this position, I don't even know what to say. For once, I'm speechless, but actually, no, I'm not. I mean, it's just, again, it's irresponsible and it's untrue. Like, how do you even connect those dots? To say that intentional weight loss causes eating disorders, I mean, my reaction to that is, well, I want to see that research, because sure, there's research that says that people with eating disorders or a predisposition to eating disorders want to lose weight. But we all know that already. That does not equate to people who have lost weight intentionally automatically have an eating disorder, or even worse, like any intentional weight loss is an eating disorder. There's no research that proves cause and effect with dieting and eating disorders. And I'd like to remind you also that most dietitians don't put people on diets. When you say, well, dieting causes this and dieting is worse for you than being overweight, and weight cycling causes heart disease, but being overweight doesn't, and all of that. And these are actual things that credentialed health professionals are saying. You can't lump what dietitians do, most of us, including myself, do into like the same category as Jenny Craig and Weight Watchers and whatever else conventional restrictive diets, whatever they may be. It's like two different things. I don't put people on a diet. So to say, well, you shouldn't be helping people lose weight because you're harming them and you're causing them eating disorders. Well, nothing I do causes an eating disorder. And if what I'm doing is triggering an eating disorder, it's probably not, because I screen people first, like any credible, responsible health professional or dietitian should do. And, where are you getting those numbers? What numbers actually do you even have? Where are you getting these assertions from?
Yeah, I think as a dietitian who myself, like I said, I did clinical. I was an outpatient dietitian. It was actually my favorite job. I'm a certified diabetes educator. I have been for 20 years. I get confused with, where did we come up with dietitians don't care about intuitive eating or help people with behavior change, or like you said, screen for some potential disordered eating? I mean, I did a lot of weight management counseling, and I saw a lot of people with some disordered eating habits, regardless of whether they were trying to lose weight or not. I mean, I think that there's a lot going on there. And certainly when I see somebody with diabetes, whether weight is a focus or not, I'm teaching them how to count carbs. I'm teaching them to know, okay, when you have this, this is how many carbs are in it. When you have this, this is how many carbs are in it.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to see what effect it has on your blood sugar. For some people, it will be a big impact. For other people, there won't be much of a difference. And I feel a little misunderstood as an old school dietitian who was using intuitive eating and mindfulness, whether it was called that or not.
Right.
All dietitians, maybe I'm Pollyanna, but I feel like all dietitians, we're not in the field to get rich. We're in the field to help people.
Right.
And we're in the field to help people have a good relationship with food, a good relationship with their body. And for those who want to lose weight, or that a mild weight loss would have a huge health outcome, why not help them have some healthier habits? So I am kind of confused by the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's confusing how people can be so negative about others, like their colleagues, for example. We can't all practice the same way. And to criticize your colleagues, especially in a public forum, but even in a private forum, because, we all hear what everyone else says about us. It's a small profession. It's cruel, and it makes us look so bad. Sure, we all practice intuitive eating or eating intuitively. Like, I got ripped apart by an intuitive eating dietitian because I mentioned intuitive eating, but she didn't feel like I was supposed to be talking about it because I'm not an intuitive eating dietitian and what I was saying isn't true intuitive eating. But why are, it's like there's this militant faction who just like goes nuts. And it's like, listen, people are always going to want to lose weight, and I'm going to help them to do it responsibly. But my focus isn't even on weight. I never weigh people. I don't put people on diets. Like, how many times am I going to say that in this podcast? But
yeah, you said you don't even have a scale in your office, right?
No, I don't. And I think 2 people in a year asked me to like weigh them. No one wants to be weighed. Not my clients. Who cares? But you can't sit there and say, well, being overweight is less dangerous than weight cycling, or being overweight is less dangerous than dieting. They both are dangerous in their own ways. Right. But like, as a CDE, Melissa, you have to admit, or maybe you don't, but if someone is very obese, it's going to mess with their blood sugars. And in turn, their high blood sugars puts them at increased risk for all sorts of other chronic diseases. So how did we get to this point where it's like our colleagues are positively terrified to talk about how they help people lose weight because they're afraid of being attacked?
Yes.
And to this place where we're denying the science behind obesity and weight loss and chronic disease and the links between all of those. Like, how did we get to this place? And how did we get to the place where we're so freaking rude to each other? And we think that we have the answers and everybody else doesn't.
Right.
Because none of us have the answers.
Right. How did we get to this? You mentioned earlier, we all practice differently.
Right.
I've always said there's different types of patients and clients, and there's different types of dietitians. You got to find the right fit for you. I'll say it again. For as long as I can remember in school and in my early days working with patients, it was always about helping them make healthier habits so that they could have better quality of life and choose things that fit their lifestyle. I just don't know how we got here. And to your point too, the divisiveness within our profession, it makes me sick to my stomach. I mean, there have literally been times when I thought, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. And I know people who are afraid to speak up.
Yeah.
And people have called me and said, hey, I kind of like how you're approaching this topic. I don't talk about weight loss, intuitive eating a lot on my show. I have a variety of topics. I like to say everything from fad diets to farming. I'm more about clearing up the science and empowering people to have a better quality of life. So, variety of topics. But when I do talk about this topic, I get people calling me up or emailing me and saying, I really appreciate your approach on this. How did we get here? And why do we have these camps? And why are we not playing nice in the sandbox? Why are we not being professional?
I think some dietitians have such a sense of entitlement. I have no idea why. I mean, I guess we're old school where we respect our colleagues. And there's an unwritten rule that you don't take your colleague down in public. And if you have a problem with me, you don't tweet about it or post in a private, quote unquote, Facebook group about me because I'm going to see everything. And I do. Mm-hmm. I got moles everywhere.
Yeah. You have friends.
Oh, yeah. It's obscene. I was told by a dietitian that I deserve to get all the crap that I get, from my colleagues because I do it to fad diet creators. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? That's so different. The fact that I take down Dr. Oz because he's selling some crazy diet, that means that my colleagues can publicly sling mud at me. Like, that's so rude and it's so inappropriate and it's inexcusable. And people went nuts about my book subtitle because it has ditch diet culture, lose weight, and to heal your relationship with food forever. I mean, that's the subtitle, but because it has ditch diet culture and lose weight in the same subtitle, like you haven't even read the book. It's 5 words.
Yeah, right.
It's 5 words, excuse my French, that you're like freaking out about, assuming, first of all, I was told that I am co-opting anti-diet language, which, it doesn't belong to you.
Right.
And second of all, like, you maybe want to read the book before you start attacking me. But my publisher was quite happy. They enjoy the publicity, right? But it's so crazy. Like, these people are so triggered by like what they perceive to be like co-opting anti-diet language. Meanwhile, I don't know how many of them have ever been overweight in their lives.
Mm.
They're all thin. They're all white. They're all privileged. It's like a virtue signaling dumpster fire. Mm-hmm. Why can't you just be nice? I don't want you to be a bitch, but I'm talking like this because I'm here on this podcast and I'm speaking for I don't know how many dietitians who have direct messaged me and said, thank you so much for standing up for us because we are so afraid of getting attacked. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you're doing is great. And these people are terrifying.
Yeah.
And that's part of the way they operate is like they try to scare people into submission. I don't think your colleagues should do that. Again, like, call me old school, but there is an unwritten rule, isn't there, Melissa?
That's what I feel like. I'm going to use your words because you put it really well. Besides saying that, we don't put people on diets, is that dietitians all hate the diet industry, diets and diet culture. We know that restrictive diets seem to increase the likelihood of weight regain, metabolic damage, breakdown of a person's relationship with food, and so on. We deplore weight stigma. And for you to go out and attack the Dr. Oz's of the world, and I'll just say on a side note, I can't say a lot about it because it's inappropriate to, but I was an expert witness on a trial that sent somebody to jail for fraud, basically. So I know that it should be the dietitians against the diet industry.
Yeah.
And these frauds and these charlatans and these snake oil salesmen. There shouldn't be this infighting.
It's crazy because I get accused of co-opting anti-diet language, but like we're all anti-diet. We all think that fat stigma is horrible. We all think that, yes, people can be healthy at every size or any size, and that everybody should be treated the same. And who gives a shit about what Adele weighs? And, like all of that stuff makes me sick too. Diet culture makes me sick. And I am not contributing to diet culture or giving someone an eating disorder because someone walks into my office and says, you know what? I gained 20 pounds and I don't like the way my jeans fit. And they're looking at me to help them lose that weight. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that, I'm feeding into diet culture. I 100% believe that weight loss and diet culture can be exclusive of each other. They do not have to cohabitate at all. And this is one of the main things that we butt heads about in our profession is, can the desire to lose weight and healthy weight loss exist without diet culture? I think it can. And a lot of people do too. I asked all of them before I started writing my book because I was like, do you think that am I crazy? And they're like, yes.
They didn't say, yes, you're crazy. They said, yes.
No, they said, yes, like diets don't have to be because of diet culture and we need this book.
Yeah.
And so that's what it is. But I just think we need to get to a place where people aren't so militant and trying to scare people into submission or to try to see it their way. We already see that like with different eating groups, like militant vegans, militant carnivores. It's like all you're doing is making people hate you.
Mm-hmm.
And you're really polarizing the topic when we could come together. Because it's funny, like I had a conversation on Twitter with a girl who's super, super, super into like intuitive eating, health at every size. She came out swinging at me. I remember this conversation was actually this past December on my birthday when I was in the airport with my 2 kids going to Florida. And I'm like talking to this girl. And finally I was like, it's my birthday and it's 9:00 at night and I'm about to catch a flight. Like I got to get off. But it was so crazy because when we finally started to talk, we agreed on everything.
Yeah.
We agreed on everything except she thought that any intentional weight loss was a diet and that it signaled diet culture. But this is my point. All of us as RDs, of course, the health of the client or the patient at heart, and we want to help other people, but most of us are like 99% together on all of these things. And then it's just this 1 or 2 things that we disagree on. And it's like 2 apples that ruin the whole box, right?
Yeah.
And it's so upsetting because there's no need for it. And it also makes us look horrible and not credible at all when we're attacking each other online. Like that's so gross. It's so dirty.
And I think a lot of people don't even know what a dietitian is or does. And then you add this to it. We need to lift our profession up and have a better image and get more respect, as I like to say. But yeah, like you said, I think we can all agree that everybody could do better by eating more plants. Does that mean everybody needs to be vegan? No. Does that mean that eating meat is bad? No. It's a spectrum. And where that person, a particular client or patient fits on that spectrum is really up to them. And it's up to us to provide information that's credible so that they can make, like I like to say, their own well-informed decisions based on facts and not fear. Well, let's talk a little bit more about the science, and then I want to ask you about some of your other recent posts. Let's talk a little bit more about the science, especially for the listeners who are not dietitians. Why, when we look at, this old statistic about 95% and how, people can't keep the weight off and they gain it back.
Right.
Talk to me a little bit about the diets that people get put on in these research studies, and also that weight health link that some dietitians are saying isn't real, isn't there. So What's one of the reasons that people don't stay on the diets or don't keep the weight off?
So most nutrition studies, they're not done in a lab, but diets are assigned to people in different groups. And these are not generally diets that you would go on or what any dietitian would prescribe for a client. They are extremely low carb. I mean, I guess some people like to go on those ones, or extreme intermittent fasting or whatnot, but
very low calorie.
Yeah, they're really hard to stick to. And these are, like I mentioned before, they're not anything that most responsible dietitians would assign to a normal person to do. So you see a very large attrition rate in these studies for that reason. Like, for example, the Diet Fit study, which was done very recently. It's a really well done study between a low carb diet and low fat diet, and it measures weight loss or whatnot. And so the low carb diet group, they started on really, really low carbs for a couple of weeks, and then they got to increase carbs ad libitum. Most of them ended up at like 90 something grams of carbs, like way, way higher than they were allowed initially. But a lot of diet studies don't allow that. They keep these people on these diets that they wouldn't necessarily choose for themselves. So they end up having a high attrition rate.
Right. That leads into that. There's reasons why people aren't staying on the diet and keeping the weight off that are meaningful, adding meaningful information to, we're not just saying, oh, any behavior change, any quote unquote diet, oh, nobody can stick with it. Because clearly that's not the case.
A lot of the diet studies offer nutrition counseling of some sort, but it's not prolonged. It's not real life. And like what you say, I mean, losing weight and keeping it off, it's not about only like making changes to your food. It's finding the changes and the plan that works for you as an individual and increasing sustainability, not only by doing that, because we're all different, but by having support, not support that lasts for 3 months or 9 months or a year. It's like forever. And choosing a goal that's not a weight goal, but like a goal that fits with your life, that's doable and is not going to cause you anxiety. None of these diet studies really get into that. So it's like not real life, but food nutrition research isn't real life anyways.
Exactly. There's so many limitations. I talk about that on the show a lot. And by the way, I want to mention I have a related podcast that people might be interested in. I recently did an episode with Ted Kyle from Conscious Health, and we talked about body positivity and obesity care and how the two are not mutually exclusive. It kind of goes along the lines of this conversation. But I also did an interview with dietitian Felicia Stoller about the prolonged fasting mimicking diet. And I just want to put it out there to say, I would be the first person to say, I do not do well with restriction, dieting, and I don't have a good history. But at the same time, healthy behavior change and we're good friends.
Right.
If I had M&Ms in the house, they would be at my desk at work and I would be eating them all day long. Been there, done it, used to be a thing. So I don't keep them in my house. Does that mean I never eat chocolate or desserts or candy? No, they're just not calling my name all the time.
That's diet behavior according to intuitive eating, because that's what I got yelled at for, right. Because I wrote in a blog post that you shouldn't keep trigger foods in the house. And I got like dragged because an intuitive eating dietitian was like, yeah, that's diet behavior. Intuitive eating says that blah, blah, blah. You should keep it in the house. Okay. But like intuitive eating isn't for everyone, even though you guys say it is. It's actually not. And I've counseled patients for 20 years and I can tell you that it's not. Some people need structure. It's not a matter of, oh, you'll get there someday. Right. You'll get there someday. It's like, no, I'm going to meet this person where they're at and give them the structure they want, because why wouldn't I? They're paying me to do it. And they're asking me as a trusted health professional, not to change their mind, but to meet them where they are with safe and actionable tips and goals. So right. What the hell's wrong with that?
Yeah, everybody is different.
Yeah.
The reason for my example is, that works for me. Like, I don't feel deprived at all. I'll admit during the quarantining, yep, M&Ms were at the top of my list and we've had them around and I've had them in moderate amounts. It's not a big deal. but I know it's best for me. It's like out of sight, out of mind. If
Yeah.
they're not here, I don't eat them. I still eat other candy or whatever. It's just not a thing for me.
And you know what? Why do you even have to explain that?
Right.
The fact that you feel the need to explain that talks to
Use
me.
it as an example. It's an example, but bringing to life how everybody's different.
Yeah.
So interestingly, when I did the 5-day fasting mimicking diet, which people can listen, I don't share like all the details of my whole story because I didn't want the episode to be all about me. But I will say that I fully expected, first of all, I wasn't looking to do it. I was just wanting to interview Felicia Stoller about it. And she's like, well, I'll send you the product. You might as well try it. And it was like right at Christmas time. And I was like, I don't want to do this. But I'm like, well, hey, I'll know more about the experience and I could speak to it during the podcast, right? And it's a 5-day thing. And I fully gave myself permission. If I'm feeling mentally like crap or physically like crap, I'm bailing.
Right.
But I did not feel restricted. I did not feel deprived. I shocked myself. I was just open to the experience, and I'm not saying it's something that people should do. I'm just saying, even as much as I know myself as a dietitian, I still thought, oh, well, let me try this on. Let me just be open to the experience. And I think that I like to have that approach with people. Like, you know yourself better than anyone else. Go with your gut. Do what you think makes the most sense, but don't be afraid to try something on. Whether you weigh yourself or you don't weigh yourself, or you eat meat or you don't eat meat, or you
tracking food, or most people shouldn't, but like some people love it, and so it's fine, and they don't have a history of eating disorder. It doesn't trigger them in any way. Some people like ketogenic diets. Some people want to do intermittent fasting.
Exactly.
Why is that a bad thing? You can't tell people the same thing is for everyone.
Right. I mean, that's the basic tenet of our profession is individualization.
And when we're talking about inclusivity for everybody, why are we not being inclusive with our colleagues or with our clients? That's so f***ed up. It's not okay to be like that.
I agree.
Be open-minded. It's fine. I mean, I tried intermittent fasting, the 5 and 2, and it was triggering for me. Like I couldn't do it.
Totally understand.
But I wouldn't say that nobody should do it.
Yeah, right. For me, like you said earlier, nobody wants to be weighed. I'm that person. I weigh myself almost every day because it doesn't trigger me. But when I go to the doctor's office, no, I don't want to be weighed. It's a personal thing for me.
I'll tell you how much I weigh.
Yeah, like let me just maybe you don't even need to know, right?
Whatever. I like the opposite. I let her weigh me, but I don't even step on the scale here.
Right. And then that's something, I've had conversations with other dietitians. Again, I think these are just examples of how everybody's different and trying to find out what works for each person is so important.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the weight health link, because again, that's something that we kind of already touched on this, but let's talk about the science there a little bit. Again, as a certified diabetes educator, yes, I've seen this and I've seen this with patients and I've seen it in the research. But when somebody says, oh, no, it's just healthier to just be overweight, the weight loss doesn't result in any positive health outcomes. What do you say?
I think that's crazy. And my dad, who was an orthopedic surgeon, is like doing 500 RPM in his grave right now, because he'd be like, are you out of your mind? Like the joint pain. And a lot of the recommendations, if you will, that I've heard from anti-diet individuals are like, well, if someone's obese and they have knee problems, don't tell them to lose weight. Just tell them to strengthen their muscles in their legs. But I just don't get it. Like, no, there is a point where you have to admit that weight and blood sugars, hypertension, it is linked. Not in everybody. Certainly there are people who are obese and very healthy, probably more of them than we know, right? Mm-hmm. And you can definitely not determine somebody's health by their weight. We all know that, okay?
And we know a lot of normal, quote unquote, or thin people, they're not necessarily healthy.
Right. But to say that nobody should lose weight to improve their health is absurd to me, really absurd. Like if someone is extremely overweight and has blood sugars of, I forget the American measures now, they're like 400. That's American, right? We do things in millimoles in Canada. I know it's so weird. But to say, well, reducing your weight won't help that is, should they be put on a diet? Of course not. We need behavior change. We need to figure out why they make the dietary choices they do if they're making choices that are not as nourishing as they could be. And this is the whole thing. I'm doing like a little pivot here because for my book, it's like, let's work your stuff out and then I'm going to teach you how to eat. Because we can all talk till we're blue in the face about whether weight is linked with health or how a person should be eating or what's the healthiest diet or blah, blah, blah. But unless you get to the why, which nobody does, it's like crazy. None of these commercial diets do it. Noom does it a little bit, but I want to know why a person is making the choices to eat the way they do and why they look at their body the way they do.
And Noom has been attacked also.
But Noom is actually legit. Absolutely. Yes, Noom is a diet, but not like...
I haven't used it, but it looks like it's focusing on behaviors.
It's actually great. And it talks about behavior change. I think, we can talk about all of these things, but until you get to the reason why someone is making these decisions and why they feel the way they do about themselves, you're still at square one.
And we know somebody could have body image issues and a bad relationship with food and a bad relationship with their body and look like the picture of health.
If you're arguing, well, are weight and health linked? I don't even want to have that conversation because of course they're linked, but what about a person's mental health, right? And diets do tend to destroy that. Yes. But I want to know how they feel about themselves and how they grew up and like what that side of the story is about.
Yeah, there's so much there. I'm just going to say I'm going to link to some related episodes in my show notes because I've had conversations about behavior change with some interesting guests. And one of them is Dr. James Hill, and he talks about asking why until you cry and really getting to that why, which sounds bad, but it's good.
But it's great. It feels horrible. And I tell people that in my book because it's all about changing your negative core values, right?
And figuring out what's under there.
Yeah, but it feels horrible. And a lot of people don't want to do it because it feels horrible.
Yeah. And, just one more personal example. As a dietitian and going through menopause, I worked with a dietitian friend of mine, and I might do a full podcast episode on it, but we'll see. But I felt like my body was telling me that even though I don't eat large portions and I don't like feeling full, which I think is just the way I was born and it's helped me. It's been good for me.
Yeah.
But as I went through menopause and I started putting on some weight, I felt like I was feeling really full all the time, even though I wasn't eating large portions. But I would say to myself, but for dinner, I just had a chicken breast and some whole grain rice and some steamed veggies. Like, there's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Well, over time, I thought, maybe that's still too much. I'm so full. And I said to my doctor, I said, maybe my body is telling me I just don't need that much. And she goes, I don't think it works that way. I'm like, but maybe it does. And so I started doing more intuitive eating, which, long story short, I realized I was already doing. I just didn't know I was doing it, which was really fun and interesting experience. But when I took my normal or smallish portions and just cut back a little bit, I had plenty. I had enough calories. I had enough protein. I had enough, well, it's always hard to get fiber. That's where I struggle a little bit, but it was just a really interesting process. And I just feel like that wasn't a diet.
Right.
That was just me trying to say, okay, yeah, I don't need as many calories at 51 years old as I did at 31, which really stinks, but it's the reality.
Sucks.
It's physiology.
Yeah.
What am I supposed to do? And I felt better that I was listening to myself and that I felt better physically because I wasn't full. It wasn't about weight. I mean, sure, even if I'm eating what somebody would say a reasonable amount of calories, but it's still too much for my body, then I don't need those extra calories,
Right. But you didn't have to count calories. You just sort of cut down the food.
Right. And I should clarify, the only reason I knew the calories and the protein and the fiber is because since I'm a dietitian, I was worried. Well, if I eat less, am I going to be too low in calories? Am I not going to have enough protein because I don't want to lose muscle mass? Am I going to be getting enough fiber? So I just spot checked here and there,
right,
just to be sure. I wasn't counting calories. I was doing my hunger levels, and I wasn't even writing down like the portions of food at first. I was just writing down, I had some chicken or whatever. So yeah, that was just spot checking because I wanted to be sure that I wasn't going too low, even if I didn't feel restricted.
Right.
I didn't want to be going too low. So yeah, it was a really interesting process. So I digress. Let's talk a little bit about, because I know as we're wrapping up here, I want to get your input on some of the recent posts you did on coronavirus, because this speaks to a lot of like the myth busting and the opportunistic piranhas out there trying to make a buck and take advantage of people. And I know early on, when we were social distancing and then it turned into shelter in place for us here in Chicago, I did a blog post and then I did a couple of coronavirus related podcasts, and I saw some of your posts and I put them as resources in mine.
Thank you.
But you've got one, it's a Mythbuster, coronavirus cure and prevention. And then also, can you prevent coronavirus with food or supplements? I think you have like a shopping or food safety one too, but I think the myth busting is a really good example of what you do all the time. So do you want to kind of give us the rundown on the biggest coronavirus cure and prevention myths? Like you talked about keto, organic, elderberry, things like that. Do you want to just kind of give us the top line on that?
There's a lot of stuff going on out there. And it's funny that you ask, because there's a dietitian on Instagram who was saying the other day that something, I forget what it was, but you could eat something and it prevents viruses.
Oh my God.
And I, of course, couldn't hold my fire. What a shock. And I was like, nothing prevents viruses. Or she was saying it like keeps your immune system good, so, you can prevent viruses. And I'm like, I don't care if you have the best immune system in the world, you're still susceptible to coronavirus and to all viruses. It may affect how your immune system responds, but you can't prevent coronavirus with food or supplements or anything like that. And I mean, yes, you can make yourself stronger, but the bottom line is, yes, I've been seeing a lot of posts about, everything. Silver, whatever it is that turns your skin blue.
Colloidal silver.
So crazy. And elderberries and apple cider vinegar, of course, and like essential oils and like how they sanitize. They totally don't sanitize. And people, I think, are just, of course, are trying to profit. It's like disaster profiteering, which is really shows you the kind of a person they are and the kind of people who are out there. But there's so many gullible people, and it's sad because people are so afraid and they're so desperate. And it's the same with cancer patients and supplements and naturopaths. And they're like, take these supplements and, eat a raw diet. And it's like, what are you talking about? These people are desperate, but this is not going to cure their cancer. You know what? My answer, the short answer to all of this is, if it worked, we wouldn't have coronavirus.
Right.
Right? If that weight loss supplement worked, we wouldn't be overweight. If cancer could be cured by your friggin' lemon water, it wouldn't happen. Like, it would be first line treatment, but of course it's not. So I think people want to try things, and that is fine. And if something doesn't hurt you, like drinking elderberry, sure, why not? It's not harmful, but don't expect it to cure you or to prevent coronavirus. Don't let it give you a false sense of security, because you aren't protected by those things. And the only thing really that protects you is social distancing, wash your hands, and listen to what the CDC says, honestly.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll have more information soon. In one of your posts, you actually did kind of a breakdown on, because, we're hearing about immune boosting foods and everything. You kind of did a breakdown on your immune system and how you don't want your immune system to overreact. And this was, I don't have the date in front of me, but this was pretty early on.
Yeah, it was early.
And then we start hearing about some of these people who they're having this reaction because their immune system seems to be over responding. And I thought that was really...
Yeah, it's the cytokine storm, right?
Right.
The cytokine storm. So if your immune system works too well and you have this cytokine storm, which unfortunately, I think a high percentage of people don't get out of and they end up dying. The whole immune boosting thing, it's just a matter of semantics, I think, is what it comes down to, because you don't want to boost your immune system. Boosting your immune system means that your immune system doesn't have a balanced response, which is what you want. It means that your immune system overreacts, like it does with autoimmune diseases like lupus, for example. And that's just, it goes haywire. And we are seeing that with some coronavirus patients. We don't know why some people get that cytokine storm and some people don't, and why some people pull through and some people don't. I personally think it's genetic. But yeah, The only thing that you can do is basically follow the guidelines and cross your fingers and don't expect food to cure or prevent singularly. You have to employ a large volume of tactics. And, for those people who think that I've been paid off by the government or there's some government conspiracy or the CDC, blah, 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 that's just, I don't even want to go there. That's silly. But there are a lot of people who say that, the government, blah, blah, blah. It's people are dying.
Right.
It's horrible.
And, yes, here, once again, the opportunistic folks taking can't we just talk about what nutrient-rich diet could be to help people just be healthy? And maybe how do we get more nutrient-rich foods to those who are food insecure? Could we just please, have a meaningful conversation in that direction?
Right. I mean, incidentally, the people who are most food insecure are most likely to be the ones who are actually going to work right now, unfortunately, and getting COVID at a much higher rate than the rest of us. And I think we need to focus our attention on those people instead of sitting in our homes and talking about how Himalayan sea salt is going to detox you. It's so obnoxious.
Absolutely. More meaningful conversations on the topic are needed for sure. Mm-hmm. And like I said, more information hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about your book. I will stay tuned for that. You have to keep me posted. And if people want to follow you, your blog is abbylangernutrition.com. Well, it's your website and blog. And on Twitter, you're at Langer Nutrition, and that's the same for Instagram. And on Facebook, you're Abby Langer Nutrition. I highly encourage people to follow you and check out some of those conversations and your posts. I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show and having a conversation with me. That's so important. And thank you for debunking all the diets and explaining more about your perspective on diet culture and speaking up for those who are afraid to. In breaking down complex nutrition concepts so that the average person can understand and use that information. That's so important. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And for everybody listening, as always, enjoy your food with health in mind. Till next time.
For more information, visit soundbitesrd.com. Music by Dave Burke, produced by Jag in Detroit Podcasts.